In March 2021, one container ship halted $9 billion of trade a day. For 6 days, 400 vessels were stuck. But the Red Sea did not suddenly matter again because of one grounding. This corridor has connected continents for 4,000 years. So why did the world need a crisis to remember? Because the real vulnerability is not one ship, it is a chain of choke points no one thinks about until they fail. Long before container ships and global news alerts, the Red Sea was already a lifeline between continents. Around 2000 BCE, Egyptian expeditions set out across these waters in search of the land of Punt, returning with incense, gold, and rare woods. Archaeologists have uncovered ancient ports like Berenice and Myos Hormos along the Egyptian coast, their storage rooms and docking basins carved into the desert rock. Even then, the sea's geography offered a shortcut, linking the riches of Africa and Arabia to the markets of the Nile and beyond. By the 1st century Common Era, Greek and Roman sailors were using the Periplus of the Erythraean Sea, a navigator's manual that mapped out trade winds, safe harbors, and the best seasons to sail. Goods from India and East Africa, spices, ivory, textiles flowed north through Red Sea ports, then overland to the Mediterranean. These routes stitched together empires, fueling demand for pepper in Rome and frankincense in the temples of Egypt. But the Red Sea's importance was never just about luxury goods. Its narrow shape, flanked by deserts and mountains, created a natural corridor, a place where ships, caravans, and armies all converged. Each era brought new players: Arab traders, Ottoman admirals, Portuguese navigators, all drawn by the same logic. Whoever controlled the Red Sea controlled the flow of wealth between East and West. The evidence is still there in the ruins of ancient warehouses and the faded lines of old maps, tracing a path that would one day demand an even faster shortcut. The need for speed and security across this ancient corridor set the stage for the engineering ambitions that would follow. The Suez Canal's opening in 1869 changed the rules of global trade overnight. By slicing through the Egyptian isthmus, it cut the journey between Europe and Asia by thousands of kilometers, eliminating weeks at sea and millions in shipping costs. A ship sailing from Shanghai to Rotterdam via the Suez Canal travels 11,800 nautical miles. The long way around Africa adds another 3,400. For a modern container vessel, that shortcut means saving 7 to 10 days of transit and up to $1.5 million in fuel per voyage. Not surprisingly, about 80% of Asia to Europe container traffic now depends on this route. But the canal's importance isn't just about time and money. Each year, around 18,000 ships pass through Suez, moving nearly 50 million containers, roughly 10% of all global trade by value. Oil and gas flow through in staggering quantities, about 10 million barrels of crude and 1.5 million tons of liquefied natural gas every day. The canal has become a main artery for energy and manufactured goods, linking factories in East Asia to consumers in Europe and beyond. In 2015, Egypt completed a major expansion, a new 35-kilometer channel running parallel to the original. This upgrade boosted daily capacity by 30%, allowing more and larger ships to transit simultaneously and cutting average wait times by about 10 hours. The Suez Canal Authority called it a leap forward for global commerce, emphasizing that every minute saved translates into lower costs for shippers and ultimately for consumers. Yet, with all this optimization comes a hidden risk. The more efficient the shortcut, the more the world leans on it. When nearly 1/5 of global oil and 1/10 of all goods flow through a single 120-kilometer waterway, a single blockage or disruption can ripple across continents. The canal's leverage is clear. It is not just a marvel of engineering, but a single point of dependence for the global economy. On the morning of March 23, 2021, the Ever Given, one of the world's largest container ships, ran aground in the Suez Canal. For 6 days, the 400-meter vessel blocked all passage through the canal's narrowest stretch. By the time it was refloated on March 29th, a queue of nearly 400 ships had formed at both entrances. These were not just container ships, but oil tankers, bulk carriers, and car carriers, each one loaded with goods destined for every continent. The daily value of cargo held up by the blockage was estimated between $9 and $10 billion. That is more than the GDP of some nations, stalled by a single ship wedged across a 120-kilometer waterway. Every day the canal was closed, the world's supply chain stretched a little thinner. Shipping companies scrambled to reroute vessels around the Cape of Good Hope, adding more than a week to delivery times and millions in extra fuel costs. The Ever Given incident did not just inconvenience a few ports, it paused the flow of about 12% of global trade. The numbers are stark: 6 days, 400 ships, and nearly $60 billion in goods delayed. In a world built on just-in-time delivery, the shock was immediate, and the consequences rippled far beyond Egypt's shores. Freight rates didn't just tick up, they soared. Within days of the Ever Given grounding, the Baltic Dry Index jumped 125%, and the Freight-OAS Baltic Exchange Index for a standard 40-foot container surged by 80%. Spot rates doubled on some Asia-Europe routes, forcing shippers to make tough choices, pay premiums, wait in line, or reroute around Africa at even greater expense. The ripple effects didn't stop at sea. German automakers reported a 5 to 7% slowdown in parts deliveries, leading to temporary shutdowns at assembly plants. Electronics manufacturers like Apple and Samsung faced 2-week delays on key components, straining inventories and pushing up prices for finished goods. A supply chain executive summed up the mood saying, "It's not just about one ship or one canal, it's about how fragile the whole system really is." When a single blockage can cost billions and leave factories idle, you realize how little slack there is. These shocks revealed a deeper vulnerability. The drive for efficiency, lean inventories, and just-in-time delivery left companies exposed to disruption. Suddenly, the world's obsession with speed and cost savings looked like a liability. The lesson was clear. When a single choke point falters, the costs echo across boardrooms, shop floors, and supermarket shelves worldwide. At the southern end of the Red Sea lies the Bab-el-Mandeb, a narrow strait that acts as a natural bottleneck for global shipping. At its tightest point, it measures just 18 nautical miles across, barely enough for 2 shipping lanes and a buffer. Every day, around 140 vessels squeeze through this corridor, including some of the world's largest oil tankers and container ships. The numbers are staggering. Nearly 20% of the world's crude oil and 30% of its liquefied natural gas pass through these waters, along with about 10% of global container traffic. Beneath the surface, the channel's depth ranges between 50 and 80 meters, deep enough for the biggest ships, but with little room for error. The sheer density of traffic, combined with the physical limits of the strait, means that any obstacle, natural or man-made, can disrupt the flow in an instant. The Bab-el-Mandeb isn't just a line on the map, it's a pressure point where geography alone turns local risks into global consequences. In the early 2020s, the war in Yemen spilled out onto the water. Houthi forces, armed with Iranian-supplied missiles and drones, began targeting ships passing through Bab-el-Mandeb. What began as sporadic attacks soon became a campaign. Oil tankers, bulk carriers, and even container vessels came under fire. The old threat of piracy gave way to something far more sophisticated, with anti-ship missiles launched from the Yemeni coast and drones flying low over the sea, striking vessels flagged in Europe, Asia, and the Middle East. According to Michael Knights, a leading Yemen analyst, the Houthis' shift to long-range weaponry turned the Red Sea from an accident-prone corridor into an intentional battlefield. Each attack forced shipping companies to reroute, to delay, or to pay higher insurance premiums. The message was clear. A local conflict could now disrupt a global artery, and the risk was not just from storms or navigation errors, but from deliberate, calculated strikes. Naval escorts now crisscross the Red Sea, forming multinational convoys to shield commercial shipping from missile and drone attacks. The United States leads Combined Task Force 153, while European and regional navies coordinate patrols, each operating under international law to guarantee safe passage. James Kraska, A leading expert on maritime law points out that these escorts are legal so long as they protect neutral shipping and coordinate with local authorities. But extra security comes at a price. Insurers have raised war risk premiums, adding as much as $3 to $5 per barrel to the cost of oil shipped through the corridor. An insurance analyst explains that every new attack or threat leads to instant premium hikes, which ripple through shipping contracts and eventually reach store shelves in the form of higher prices. What starts as a military patrol in a far-off sea can end up as a few extra dollars at the gas pump or a delayed delivery for a new phone. The Red Sea's new normal is not just about warships. It is about how global markets now price in the risk of disruption at every step. Every day, 10% of global trade threads through these waters. As supply chains tighten and rivalries sharpen, the Red Sea's vulnerabilities become everyone's problem. Security here is no longer a regional issue, it is a global balancing act. The next disruption will not just make headlines, it will hit home.